The Kaiser class as a whole have a video detailing their technical specifications, hopefully appearing around about now. But today we're going to look at the specific history of the name ship of the class. Initially, the ship was designated Ersatz Hildebrand. Hildebrand was one of the Siegfried-class coastal defence ships, and this was in keeping with German policy, which stated that when a ship was to replace an older one, the hull would be known as Ersatz, roughly speaking replacement or substitute, with the name of the ship that it was to succeed inserted afterwards. In the event, Hildebrand would actually remain in German service for almost another decade, thanks to the rise in tensions immediately leading up to World War I and then the war itself. But nonetheless, the keel was laid down in September 1909, launched on the 22nd of March 1911, which could have been a slightly earlier date, but that particular date was the birthday of Kaiser Wilhelm I, the first German emperor. His grandson, the then current Kaiser Wilhelm II, was there to see the ship head down the slipway, and SMS Kaiser commissioned into the fleet just over a year later, on the 1st of August 1912. To ensure that a relatively experienced crew was present from the start, many of the men from two Braunschweig-class pre-dreadnoughts that were just in the process of decommissioning were reallocated to the new ship, which then went out on its sea trials. With those completed and the required minor changes and repairs that are inherent to any new ship were finished, Kaiser became an active part of the Kaiserliche Marine at the end of 1912. Taking advantage of the then relatively new Kiel Canal, the High Seas Fleet would transit between the Baltic and the North Sea repeatedly. The former was generally held to be better for gunnery drills, whilst the latter, which was expected to be the primary operational area, was therefore more favoured for full-scale fleet exercises, albeit there was a little bit of an element of crossover. At the end of 1913, the ship was then sent on a combination voyage that included visiting various German colonies, waving the flag and increasing German influence in South America, and also testing out their propulsion systems to see how they'd stand up to long-distance sailing. The German fleet having been slightly behind the leading edge when it came to the adoption of the turbine engine on capital ships. Kaiser and the vessels accompanying her arrived home only 11 days before Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in 1914, which of course started the spiral of events that would lead to World War I. So there was only a truncated training cruise in the North Sea before war was declared. As one of the most advanced battleships in the fleet, as the Königs were only just starting to come online and hadn't completely been commissioned just yet, Kaiser took part in numerous excursions, trying to catch an isolated portion of the Royal Navy and defeat it. The closest that she got to action at this time was when the destroyers of the High Seas Fleet clashed with the destroyers of Admiral Warrender's six-strong 2nd Battle Squadron, before Admiral von Ingerhold broke away, believing that he was actually facing the entire Grand Fleet. Kaiser would finally see her debut in real action during the Battle of Jutland, as she was the 5th ship in the battle line, right behind the now fully operational Königs. This meant a relatively eventful day, starting with a couple of unsuccessful attempts to hit HMS Southampton of 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron, who was doing her level best not to suffer that fate, then shooting at HMS Malaya of 5th Battle Squadron with her main battery, Malaya taking numerous hits from various German capital ships around about this time, whilst Kaiser's secondary batteries assisted in the destruction of the destroyer HMS Nomad. This was then followed by assisting in the destruction of the armoured cruisers Defence and Warrior when they tried to finish off the crippled cruiser SMS Wiesbaden. Kaiser was then responsible for HMS Warspite's lifelong steering issues by scoring the hit that damaged the British vessel's steering gear and, more immediately, sending her around in a couple of circles around the crippled Warrior. During the High Seas Fleet's second run-in with the Grand Fleet, Kaiser would now be hit, twice, although neither shell functioned correctly. One of them did make it inside the ship and landed in a position that might well have set off a chain reaction in the casemate battery had it not broken up after the warhead failed to detonate. The other shell did actually explode, but did so prematurely and therefore largely caused a lot of scorching on the paint outside the ship. Her last action would be around 21:30 when, along with a number of other German battleships, Kaiser drove off an attack by British cruiser formation. Whilst various other actions that attempted to draw out the British would follow, none of these would lead to another major fleet battle, and so Kaiser's next engagement, the second out of three, would be with the Russians in 1917, briefly capturing a Russian destroyer and engaging Russian shore batteries before heading back to the North Sea, where her final engagement would be at the Second Battle of Helgoland Bight, shooting up British cruisers and then engaging the battlecruiser Repulse, but with little overall effect on either side. The end of the war would find Kaiser, along with the bulk of the High Seas Fleet, interned in Scapa Flow, where she was scuttled on the 21st of June 1919, remaining beneath the waves for about a decade before she was then salvaged and scrapped at the end of the 1920s.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.